History of the Christian Church, Part 2, and I am Dr. Pardon Mwansa. History of the Christian Church, Part 2 is a section of the entire composition of history of the Christian Church. However, history of the Christian Church, Part 2, looks at the last 500 years of the life of the Christian movement from its inception, approximately at the beginning of the AD time, when Christ Jesus is said to have been born in 5 BC. Many who have an interest in history of the Christian Church, Part 2, may have had some works done or some studies done on history of the Christian Church, Part 1. And that is the only way it can make sense, because the last 500 years of the history of the Christian Church is built on the first 1500 years. This being the case, I would like to just recap with you the value and importance and how to study history. One of the things that we will be looking at, which is important for you to keep in mind as a person interested in history and or a student of history, is to maybe acquaint yourself with some key textbooks that have been written about history of the Christian Church. And I recommend these three. Church History in Plain Language by Bruce Shelley, and then Christianity Through the Centuries by Earl Cairns, and The History of the Christian Church by Winston Walker. These are the texts that have informed much of the thoughts that we will be looking at. Now, history is a very interesting subject. What makes it interesting is that there are ways you can learn history and find a very good benefit to applying situations. In this case, I would like to deal with the concept of how do we learn history. Now, history is anything that you can describe, and most things would be described by knowing where it happened, when it happened, who was involved, what happened, why did it happen, and how did it happen. If you can provide an answer to these questions, where, when, who, what, why, how, you can write a history. And so let me illustrate how we can learn history and how we intend to learn history, particularly as we look at the history of the Christian Church, Part 2. Number one, and very, very important, you need to understand where the history of Christian Church, Part 2 took place. What was the location? Where did it move to? And where is it now? History of the Christian Church, Part 2, where we are beginning at the beginning of 1500, which is 1500 AD. At that time, the location is Western Europe. Western Europe is composed of many countries, but the key countries that will be involved in this drama will include the country of Germany, the country of Switzerland, the country of Italy, France, England, Sweden. Those Eastern countries that are, those Western countries that compose Western Europe. Now, it is important, and please do not overlook this statement. It is important that you acquaint yourself with the geographical positioning of the Western Europe on the global geography or global stage. You need to know where England is. You need to know where France is, where Portugal is, where Spain is, where Egypt is, where Italy is, where Germany is, where all these countries are, because as we learn, it will make more sense if you know the locations of these places. Obviously, as we will progress, you will notice that history of the Christian church will move from Western Europe following where the explorers went to Africa, to the Americas, and to Asia. So it's very important for you to acquaint yourself with the geography of Western Europe and the geography of the world at large, particularly Africa, the Americas, which is North America, Mid-America, and South America, as well as Asia. It's very important for you to do that. Secondly, the question of when, what time period are we looking at? I have indicated that we'll be covering the 500 years from 1500 to 2000. Why is it important to have time in your mind when you are studying history? The timeline of events is very important because you move in history, especially the spread of Christianity, you move with time. You move from this 1500s into the 1600s, into the 1700s, into the 18th and 19th, till the 2000, learning how, as a result of time, Christianity has moved to when. It becomes important for you to know so that you would place, for example, when Charles Darwin comes up with his book, The Origins of Species, you want to know what time in history. You want to understand the time when events took place. That's the issue of when. The issue of who is involved. You will notice that the history of Christian Church, part 2, starts and continues almost with certain characters that are dominant. One of the dominant characters is Dr. Martin Luther, the Reformer. Dr. Martin Luther, the Reformer, alters, changes the history of the Christian movement. Up until that time, the church had never been split primarily due to theological differences. But Martin Luther comes up with theology derived from the New Testament that is so profoundly different from the theology existing in the Roman Catholic Church, the mother church then, and based on theology, there is an entire beginning or split of the church. So to know names, for you to acquaint yourself, to know, Martin Luther was one of the actors. Zwingli was another one. Calvin John was another one. You name them in historical times, when and where. That's how you become a good historian. What happened? Talking about Dr. Martin Luther Dr. Martin Luther, the Reformer, you would know what happened. He finally, unhappy, dissatisfied with the theology of the church, he nailed the 95 Theses at the door of the church in Wittenberg. So that's what happened. That provoked a moment when the Pope reacted. And so in history, you learn what exactly happened. Why did it happen? Why did he nail the 95 Theses? He did so to create a debate so that truth might be known by facts that would come through either a debate or people examining literature. How did it happen? Or what happened? How did it end? You will learn how Dr. Martin Luther, the professor, was excommunicated from the church, and how, when he could not breathe within the church, he decided to find air somewhere else. And yes, he found air and began breathing, and he formed, or he became the father, or the vessel that was used to create a whole lot of denominations. Now, why do we learn history? To me, this is probably the most important and crucial part of learning history. As many of you would know, history explains the present. Many people today wonder, why do we have so many denominations? The Jehovah's Witness, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the Pentecostals, the Mormons, the Anglicans, the Anabaptists, the Methodists, the name whoever. You can't even end. The list is endless. Why do we have so many denominations? All of these follow the Bible, claim they all go to the Bible. And all these that I have named are Protestants. I did not even mention the Catholic Church, which is the mother church. I just mentioned the Protestants. Why do we have so many churches? You will only find the answer to why we have so many denominations in history. History will tell you, why is it that Martin Luther, who came out of the mother church, the Catholic Church, when he was excommunicated, formed the Lutheran Church? Why did other churches also leave him and form their own churches or denominations? You only find answers in history. So history explains the present. History serves as a guide. You know, you can appreciate how the Catholic Church responded to the disturbance of Martin Luther when he broke away, or when he was excommunicated and started the Lutheran movement, how the Catholic Church came back with what has been called in history a counter-reformation, and mainly carried out, executed, and successfully so by the Jesuits. And the Jesuits chose the way of education. Now, how does this serve as a guide? You can learn that if you really want to impact people, if you want to assert your position, if you want to defend your position, you've got to get to facts. You've got to go to education. You've got to learn. You've got to gather facts. History can motivate someone. When you read the history of Calvin the Reformer, who lived only for 55 years, before he even attained to be at the age of 30, this man had written the institutes, which up to this day remain so fundamental to the block thoughts of Reformation. He was in his 20s when he did that. Now, as a young person, many of you can take this as a motivating factor and say, if a person can do it in their 20s, I can do it. That's how come history motivates people. History gives practical tools. You will discover that, be it Martin Luther, be it Calvin, be it Zwingli, be it John Knox, be it John Wesley, be it Charles Wesley, be it Dwight Moody, all of these obtained their motivation to do what they did by going to study the New Testament. It became the tool. So what's the point here? The point is, you as a student of history can know that if you want to really go deep and go far and convince masses, don't spend all your time on reading commentaries. Go to the source, the New Testament, and get the truth. That's where the primary tool is. History can liberate somebody. You know, when I talk about denominational parochialism, I'm referring to the spirit that people have who believe that the Jehovah's Witness is the only true church of God, or the Seventh-day Adventist church is the only true church of God. You know, when you study history, you will be humble. You'll be humble enough to realize that God has used people outside of denominational blocks, and he still has people who are thinkers, people who are great people in each of the existing denominations. You learn to take a posture of listening more than you learn to take a posture of judgment. Only history can tell you that, because you cannot and you dare not say that the Baptists, the Anabaptists, the Anglicans don't have truth, and the only one with truth is the Lutherans because they follow Luther, who led out in the Reformation. You cannot say that and be true to history. To start with, even biblical knowledge is progressively revealed. And lastly, history predicts the future. You know, when the Catholic Church could not listen to the cries of the mystics who wanted to reform the church, when the Catholic Church failed to listen to the reformers who wanted to reform the church, when the Catholic Church failed to listen to the councils that tried to reform the church, they suffocated people, and the only way out was to exit. History predicts the future. When a denomination suffocates people by becoming a sect that simply excludes extra thinking, such a church will end up with splits. People will leave. It's just how history teaches us. With all this, I hope you are excited now to either continue with this learning journey of history of the Christian church or history as a whole. Be ready for a smooth and rough ride in Christian history. There will be some smooth rides, but there will also be some rough rides. You cannot come to the time of the Enlightenment, to the realization of the impact of the Renaissance on human thinking, when society changed from a theocentric mindset of setting God as the beginning point to setting man as the beginning point, and turning from a theocentric to an anthropocentric focus, and how the church was rocked when that came. So there will be some smooth rides as well as rough patches. But hey, what's history for? It's to teach us how to swim through all the times, including good rides and tough rides. With this, I hope you will enjoy learning history of the Christian church.